Everybody okay? This afternoon, the police department is announcing indictments in a significant robbery case that greatly impacted Nashville's Latino community. The victims of these robberies, who were numerous, were innocently attacked in their homes and in parking lots, predominantly in the south portion of our city, the Midtown Hills precinct, South Precinct, over a period of years. A significant number of resources were dedicated to attempt to identify these persons, and we are grateful today that we can say that these cases have been presented to the grand jury and indictments have been returned against 6 individuals, 4 of whom are in custody. There is still 1 female at large who is out of Clarksville and 1 male at large who is out of Memphis. The Clarksville Police Department continues to work with us to bring the female into custody. The West Tennessee U.S. Marshals Task Force is working with us to bring the Memphis man into custody. The investigation, by and large, was run out of the Midtown Hills precinct. With me to my left, Lieutenant Duche, the investigations leader from the Midtown Hills precinct, and Sergeant Will Abmonson. I'd like for them now to come up and take your questions, and they can get into the specifics of what these suspects were doing and how it greatly impacted Nashville's Latino community.
Thank you, and I'm Lieutenant Pete Duche. Thank you all for being here today and for coming out and speaking with us about this. We'd love to take any questions that you have.
Yeah, Lieutenant, Don just mentioned a significant number of resources. Can you talk about those resources for us? What was involved in this investigation to get to this point today?
Yeah, so the resources.
Could you step a little closer to the mic?
Yeah, absolutely. So the resources involved both a lot of personnel out of the Midtown Hills precinct, personnel from other precincts in Nashville. We utilized members from the FBI as well as just a lot of different resources, mostly out of Nashville's police department.
So you talked about one of these being a suspected leader of the group. Can you talk about just the organization of these 6 individuals? Were they tied to any larger type of organization? Just kind of how did all this work?
No, we don't have any indication that they were tied to a larger organization of any larger organizations. However, yeah, they were extremely organized. They have been doing this for a very long time. Our investigation indicates that it went past 2017, but in order to put all these cases together and really connect the dots, we kind of focused on the 2017 to 2019 time period, and that was the easiest with victim outreach as well. So yeah, they were extremely organized. The main leader who was in charge of running most of these and conducting most of these robberies was had a lot of organization going on there.
Why do you think they primarily targeted Latino families?
I think the Latino families, they said in one of the interviews that the Latino families are easier for them to target because they carry cash on them, and that, in their opinion, that they were less likely to call the police and ask for assistance. I think luckily we found during this investigation that the Hispanic community did a great job reaching out to us and asking for us for help, and we were happy to provide it to them and investigate these robberies.
So give an example of just sort of how organized they were. How would they choose sort of their victims? Were they kind of casing or staking out locations? How would all that kind of work?
We know that they utilized counter surveillance, meaning that they watched the police and saw how the police responded, knew how he moved, knew how he handled calls. So a significant degree of sophistication in that sense. We do believe there's a little bit of pre-planning. Again, indicated in one of the interviews, if there's a heavy police presence in one part of town, they would relocate to another part of town. But again, sticking to primarily apartment complexes that are housing Latino families.
Mentioned in the press release here is that they would target apartment homes to unlock sliding glass doors. If I remember correctly, this was something that was going on specifically about 2 years ago, and the and the El Protector program was sort of helping with outreach. Could you talk a little bit about how that program helped at all in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. So the El Protector program helped with, specifically with victim outreach, going back and trying to track who specifically were victims of these crimes and how we could connect them with some of the reports that we were looking at. And then, like you mentioned, yeah, this did go back to 2019. This investigation kind of stemmed from then, and the entire process of connecting all the dots, you know, to put it in simplest terms, has taken up until now to actually really put it all together and present it to the grand jury. So what you're talking about regarding specifically the community outreach with El Protector program, we did a lot of meeting with residents in the apartment complexes, giving them sticks and barriers to hand out to hopefully stop those sliding glass doors from being opened easily by these suspects.
We actually also brought in Spanish-speaking officers and detectives and assigned them to the unit to ensure that there was no communication barrier there. So we had 2 Spanish-speaking detectives that worked on the case and kind of established that connection and that outreach piece.
Not to get too far from the case, but can you just talk about how, you know, simple a measure of prevention, something like a stick in a sliding glass door can be to, you know, prevent something like this from happening?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest parts of that is you know, what we would call target hardening. In other words, you know, you don't want to be an easy victim for somebody, so putting that barrier in the door. So if somebody does, because one of the things that they did is they would climb up to the second story on the balconies. They wouldn't always just go through the front door or even the low door. They would climb up to the second story and going through that way. So even if you're on that second level or third level, you still want to make sure that that door is locked and secured.
Were there any Latino-owned businesses that were targeted, or was it all families and individuals?
No, it was mostly no businesses. It was individuals. They mostly started out doing it in parking lot apartment complexes in the parking lots, and that's after they kind of had a lot of success with that. I believe they got a little bit more confident, and then they moved into going into actually entering people's homes and doing it that way.
Was there a common time that this happened? Was it overnight, in the afternoon?
Generally evenings.
With the FBI involved in sort of travel to Dominican Republic, Miami, Texas, are there potentially federal charges coming down on this as well?
One of the defendants already faces federal charges. That aspect of the investigation is continuing, but they provided a significant degree of technical expertise to help us work this case.
Do you think more people will get arrested?
Well, we still have 2 outstanding that need to be arrested. Like we mentioned, one in Clarksville, one in the Memphis area, and so yeah, we definitely have those 2 coming.
And on top of them, do you expect more arrests to be made?
It's possible.
Do you guys have a reasonable
concerned about the violence? Concerned about the violence these people were committing?
Yeah, so it wasn't just a robbery. The robberies, they became more bold, and they hurt people. It physically hurt people, made them bleed, sent people to the hospital. And while we don't want to see any type of robbery, it makes it even worse when you're hurting people and injuring them and taking their life savings. So that added obviously additional importance to trying to solve this and figure out who is behind these coordinated efforts.
Well, expanding on that a little bit, I've heard the word families a lot. Like, these are coming into people's residences where I'm assuming children are. How disturbing is that? Knowing kids could be potentially victimized and families.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. It's one of the things that they did is they would make victims go into the bathrooms and just wait in the bathrooms and take their phones and leave. So it was, I'm sure, it was extremely traumatic for all of the victims.
Can you give us an estimate of the area? I know it was mentioned the south portion of the city. Do you have any streets or apartment complexes that you could name off? It
was in several apartment complexes. It included apartment complexes in Midtown Hills Precinct, South Precinct, Madison Precinct. There were a lot that were involved.
And all the way out in Hermitage as well.
Yeah.
Any roads that they hit harder than others?
There was a lot on the Nolensville Pike area close to Old Hickory Boulevard.
I just have one more question. Since they were targeting Latinos, does it fall under the umbrella of hate crime at all, any of these charges?
That's being explored. It's not up for us to make that decision.
For the two that are not in custody yet, I mean, are these two individuals sort of, I mean, at large without any idea where they are, or do investigators have some sort of reasonable idea of specifically where they might be and if they may be, be arrested soon?
We've been in communication with our partners. We believe that we know pretty good idea of where they're at, and we don't believe they're engaged in this kind of activity at this moment, based on some of our investigative means.
What do you think could be done to improve relations between the police department and the Latino community? It was mentioned that, they were hesitant to call police in situations like this. Is there anything more that can be done?
Let Captain Laura take that question. Captain Laura is here with the Office of Community Partnerships.
Good afternoon. My name is Captain Laura, out of the Office of Community Outreach and Partnerships. One of the things that is so important for us is the El Protector program, which is a program that falls under the Community Outreach and Partnerships Office. Our officer, Louis Lopez, who is the El Protector officer who's in charge of moving forward that program, has done an incredible job just connecting with the Hispanic community. We really are trying to build really strong partnerships and relationships with the different community partners, Hispanic community partners all around the county. We got so many Hispanics, so many Latinos all around, from South to Madison, South Precinct to Madison Precinct. And so really what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to continue that open line of communication. We can consistently try to do that outreach and communicate with businesses, with apartment complexes, and we work with the Hispanic media, and that really helps us to get a lot of that information that we want to educate the community on how to stay safe. El Protector program has been around for many years, and I think our relationship with the Hispanic community has gotten better over the years due to the program, and we're looking at other ways to just continue to strengthen those partnerships with the Latino community.
Well, specifically, though, what stuff are they probably afraid of in the community that makes them maybe hesitant to reach out to the police?
There's a lot of different reasons. Many people that come from countries outside of the United States, come from countries that are Latin American, their experiences with police officers in their countries. There's a lot of things, they come here, they don't know the language, they don't know how the police interact with people, and maybe the only experience that they've had was a very negative one in their country. And so a lot of them bring those experiences here, and then they're afraid to reach out to us. And again, that is why the El Protector program is so important for us. We're trying to educate the community and let them know, listen, we're here to serve you, we're here to help you, and don't be afraid to talk to us and reach out to us. And again, I think this case is a perfect case to show how that relationship has grown, that partnership, and now we're able to put some people behind bars that were preying on the Latino community.
How much do you feel like the outreach program, even specifically the stop stick, the door sticks that you guys were handing out just 2 years ago or so, how much do you feel like that may have, prevented, even more victims from all this?
I think anytime you can take a preventive measure, it helps. You're never going to be 100% protect anybody, but I think the more you do, the more protected you are. Lieutenant was saying, they were climbing to the second floor. Well, most people on second floors think that they're safe. Nobody's going to come through my door. But understanding that that is a possibility, now you're going to take an extra measure by putting that stick on your door and keeping it closed and making it more difficult to be victimized. And so those are the things that, it's a simple thing. It doesn't look like a big thing, putting a stick on a door, but it makes a difference. And I think, looking at what the detectives have done in educating people, that that may have saved a lot of people from being victims from this group.
Why don't you talk about the courage of the victims that come forward?
It's incredible. To be able to be a victim of any crime is a very scary thing, but to show that you have enough courage to come to the police and to confront people who have harmed you and your family, it's a very difficult thing, and it's an incredibly courageous thing for a lot of these families because, again, they're afraid of what the repercussions are. Many feel that they come to the police that they're going to now be a victim of maybe, getting deported, which was always a big issue for many years, not realizing the police are not, that's not what we're here for. We're here to serve them, and for them to have that courage to come and talk to us and bring us that information is really big. Especially in those families, because again, this is not something they're used to. Many people don't want to say anything. They don't want to tell anybody that they have been a victim because they don't know what's coming. They don't understand what the process is. So again, we're trying to educate them and let them know, if you come and tell us about the crime that was committed against you, we're going to serve you and we're going to help you to get through this. And we're going to try to find whoever it is that did this to you and hold them accountable for it.
If these victims didn't come forward, will we be here today, or would the investigation take even longer?
It's a good chance we wouldn't. You know, it took a really strong effort from the Latino community to come out and to reach out to the Elk Protector program and to these detectives and to give us that information. You know, the information that we gather is from the community. You know, they're the ones who are telling us who are doing, who are the suspects, what are the descriptions. All that information comes from them. So really, they're our best resource, when it comes to fighting crime.
Do you all believe there are more victims than what you've identified so far?
I couldn't answer that. That's something that I probably talk to Lieutenant Duche, let him answer that.
My guess would be yes, and I would encourage if there are any more victims, even if not directly related to this case, that I hope you see that the end result of this case is we're not just saying that we're here to help, we're showing you that we're here to help. So if anybody wants to reach out to us from any community, that we are here to help you.
So Will, you talked to the victims directly. You want to talk about their courage and...
Yeah, so I mean, we did a lot of victim outreach. Captain mentioned the Elk Protector program. We actually sent a Spanish-speaking officer over to a radio show, a Spanish-speaking radio show local here to Nashville, and we had her go on that radio show and kind of give a little bit about some of the incidents we were investigating. And we actually got outreach from victims from that radio show. So a lot of bravery on their part of coming forward, going to court when we made some of the initial arrests. Terrifying situation for them. Armed men coming in their house and taking everything that they hold dear to their lives, everything they've worked for. So an extreme amount of courage for our victims to stand up and say that they wouldn't tolerate that, and to use us as a vehicle to find justice. And we're just really proud of that relationship that's been fostered with that community. One of our Spanish-speaking officers, she was in the Elk Protector program. She would actually go to victims' houses if that made them more comfortable, and she would sit down and she would talk to a victim at their house, because sometimes they don't want to talk on the phone. So she would make that extra effort to just really sit down and make that personal interaction working on some of these cases. And when you think about 150 cases, that's a lot of victims, and that's a lot of outreach. So it was very time-consuming in that aspect.
Can you describe for us what exactly would happen when they would break into the home? What was the commonality there?
So kind of like Lieutenant Duche mentioned, this started out with street robberies. Pulling into an apartment complex, you'd see a couple guys hanging around a truck, and this group would get out and they would point a gun in these guys' face and take their money. And then it escalated into home invasions, which is obviously even more concerning. And they would enter into a home, they would take over that home, order victims into the bathroom to control them. That was the articulation reason for doing that. And take everything that they could find in their house of value from them and sell it for money, and then use that money to party and live life, to travel, to do things so they didn't have to work.
You all mentioned that you had a big response after you had the officer go on the radio. Are you all going to do more outreach, things like that, or using media to to contact people and make people aware, when you all are investigating something?
I'm going to let, well, I can tell you, that's a great question. And actually, as soon as I found out about this, Don Aaron came up to me and told me about this, and one of the first things I did was take that information and send an email out to all of the Latino media, and we have several here, because again, it's important for them to be able to understand this information real time like everyone else, so that they can push it out to those who need to hear it. They're the ones who are a lot of our voice for the Latino community. They're the ones who are getting this information out to those who need it most. So,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
thank you.